Hey guys, I'm going to change it up just a little bit this week. We'll be back with the XR250 later. This is my 98 Z50. In previous videos, if you've seen those, did a couple of mods. Did the KLX 110 forks with the adult springs, extended swing arm, and bigger shocks, as well as a couple other little things. I want to do a little bit of maintenance on this bike today. The fuel Petcock is probably the original one. Even I've tested it with the line off, leaks fuel. This carb probably hasn't been rebuilt, like gaskets and stuff haven't been replaced in a really long time. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that apart today. I have a all balls rebuild kit, new fuel Petcock from Amazon. See how that does, but we'll go ahead and get into it. Sorry if there's some wind noise. It's about 100 degrees here in Texas today. Two 10mm bolts. Seat just pops right out. And there's two little pops here on the side. And these plastics come right off. One 10mm right here. Disconnect the fuel line and the tank comes off. Spacer that goes right inside the rubber grommet here. Just make sure you hold on to that and don't lose it. Carb's pretty easy to pull. This cap here, just gotta unwind it, kind of feed it out. These needles here are made out of brass, so you want to just be careful not to bend that. Put it off to the side. I think they are the stock bolts, just two 8mm bolts. Those bolts off to the side, and just be careful. There is a O-ring on this insulator and on the carb there. Remove the air filter. It's just a Phillips or a flathead screwdriver. Simple bend clamp and that comes off. This carburetor is pretty dirty. We'll go ahead and get to opening it up and clean it out. Not too dirty actually. And it is important to count how many turns these are in. Turn them in until they lightly seat. That way when you put them in, you just seat them and you turn them back out the same amount of turns, and that'll get you pretty close to where you were before you took this apart. So that's the fuel screw. In my case, it was about 1 1/4 turns out. As an example, we've got half, 1, half, 2, 2 1/2, 3 turns out. Last thing would be the main jet here. Don't need to count the number of turns on this because it just turns until it's seated. So now this needs to get cleaned up, as well as the jets. In this instance, I'm not going to reuse them because everything comes in the all balls kit. Alright, so I've got some gloves now because we're about to clean the carburetor out. This is everything that comes included in the all balls kit. So the only thing we need to transfer over from our old parts is going to be just the idle screw, as well as the pivot for the float bowl and the float bowl. Everything else I go ahead and keep for spare parts. So all of this we're gonna need to clean. I usually put some carb clean inside of the actual bowl. A good place to soak all the small parts. Meanwhile, you're cleaning out the actual carb pin, idle screw, the screw for the pivot point for the float, and the float for the carburetor. Put a little bit more in this and set it off to the side. I like to start off by cleaning off the actual outside of the carb. Usually, like in this case especially, it's what accumulates the most junk. So if you clean it off after cleaning off the inside, you might let some junk loose and it'll make its way inside.
So the
And that should be pretty good. I'll go ahead and start putting this back together. First thing is going to be the main jet. Screw that in until it seats. Doesn't need a whole lot of pressure because these are brass. They can strip pretty easily. New floats and needle on. Make sure to line that up in there. I'm going to put the pin through. There we go. Just snug that up. Steel mixture and the idle screw. You want to just run them in until they lightly seat, and then back them off the amount of turns that you counted before when you took it apart. I'm going to go ahead and actually remove this old O-ring off of the drain. There we go. It's a little tight, but just grab this guy and run it on there. Go ahead and put this in here. Float bowl gasket only goes on one way. This little triangle here goes in this corner. Make sure it's in the groove all the way around. Next is going to be the float bowl. You want to line up that corner also with the corner of the float bowl. These are going to be the same thing. You want to just tighten them down until they seat. You don't want these to be super tight. There we go. Go ahead and put the O-ring on the back of here. Little teether here to kind of hold it in place. It can be a little bit challenging to get the needle out sometimes. In my case, I actually have an aftermarket throttle cap because I have a aftermarket throttle tube. So I need to go ahead and actually loosen this lock nut and turn it all the way in order to give myself some slack. Basically what you want to do is there's this slot here. That's where the actual throttle cable threads into. So you want to go ahead and pull the spring out, run the throttle cable through this guide here, and it comes out just like that. Careful not to lose the spring because it does want to fly out sometimes. My throttle cap is not attached to the cable like on the OEM ones. After that, I like to put my finger over the barrel here, and you want to just push this out. There is a little spring that holds the needle down in there. That off to the side. And this is the needle here. Mine does have a little bit of grooving, so I'm gonna go ahead and replace it with the one that came in the kit. If you look closely, there are grooves on the needle. In this case, there's 4. Usually the little clip, this guy here, slots into one of these, and on the stock bikes, I believe it's the center one. I actually have it moved down one clip. That's gonna actually make it richer. One way to think about it is picture this as being your main jet in the carb. This actually slides in and out of it. So if you move the clip down, it essentially moves the needle up and allows more fuel to get into the carb. So by moving down, you richen the mixture, and by moving up, you lean out the mixture, allow less fuel to get into the carb. I have it one clip down because I have an air filter and my exhaust actually doesn't have the baffle. So it flows a little better and needs a little bit more fuel. So I'll go ahead and put the new clip in the same position on the new needle. I want to just kind of compare them side by side, make sure that they're exactly the same. Thread that down into the throttle slide. The needle has this clip here, it has a slot. I like to orientate the slot to where the slot is for the throttle cable. And then when I put in the spring here, this middle section here be orientated towards the slot as well, because if it's the other way around, you actually won't be able to get the throttle cable in there sometimes. All right, and that's what it's gonna look like. If you look a little closely, the C-clip on the needle, the opening is towards this channel here, as well as the spring that holds in the needle. We're actually going to go ahead and take this little rubber gasket off here. Use the one supplied in the all balls kit. Now you got to thread the throttle cable into the cab. If you have a stock Z50 or CRF50, it's just going to be all one piece. It's a little hard to show, but you want to put the spring over the throttle cable, compress it as much as you can so that you can get the little end of the throttle cable into this little channel here, and the spring needs to go inside of the barrel. This is the assembled throttle cable with the new needle. Alright, so when you're reinstalling the throttle cable into the carb, there's one little nub that is the idle screw coming into the center here, and then there's a little channel on the opposite side. That little channel, it's hard to see, but there's a protrusion on the right hand side, or left hand side, I'm sorry, you can barely see it there. This little channel on the barrel needs to slot into there. It can be a little challenging sometimes, but if you kind of twist and do that, you can do that, and then you'll see it actually drop down into the carb body there. Mine is a aftermarket throttle cable. I can actually turn the throttle quite a bit, probably almost a quarter turn before the throttle actually starts to lift off in there. So you need to just kind of adjust and make sure that when you start pulling the throttle, the barrel moves as well, and that looks pretty good. You want to hear the slide come all the way back down. This is all put together. You want to just put it back in the reverse order that you took it apart. Alright, so before we go ahead and try to fire this up, I do need to replace the fuel petcock. If I tip it a little too much, not doing it right now of course, but it does leak gas out of the fuel petcock even when it's in the off position. One-way breather valve on here, so if I turn it over, it won't leak fuel. But if you have just the regular vent line, you can put like a small bolt in there. I'm gonna put it in here upside down on top of these the old tires that came off this Z50. I just use a crescent wrench to undo this, and it should just pull right out. This is the old and the new fuel petcocks. The new one is kind of nice because it does have this filter element here, whereas the old one did not. This one is going to provide a little bit of filtration. Alright, so unfortunately this little fuel filter does not fit inside of the opening here. Not a big deal, it actually just pulls right off of there. And it's the same kind of setup where it just has the main pickup, and then down there there's a port for the reserve. So I'll go ahead and finish threading that on, and then we'll get the tank on the bike. Alright, so I just went ahead and put the rear fenders on and the seat. It just fire up on the gas. I just came back from taking the Z50 around the block for a spin. Happy to say that it actually runs quite a bit better than it did before. Got rid of a little bit of hesitation that it had upon throttle, and it idles a lot smoother than it did before. If you were tuning in to actually see a video about the Z50, awesome, but this is actually applicable to a CRF50 and an XR50. On the package itself it said it's good for CRF50 04 to 22, XR50 2000 to 03, and Z50 from 82 to 99. So it applies to all those models as well. If you like the Z50 content, go ahead and subscribe, leave a comment. Good or bad, I'm always looking for a way to make my videos better, and I should have some more content for this coming out soon. I want to actually make a couple of custom parts for this to make it a little more enjoyable to ride for an adult. Install a full lighting system. This bike does have a lighting stator. It's one of my first videos if you want to go ahead and check that out. Thanks.